Excellent stuff this morning, philosophical policy challenges, then on to what lots of other places are doing. I think lots of messages, great conversations taking place. Today, this session, we're coming home. This really is us asking ourselves, what are our strategic ambitions? What are our achievements? What more do we have to do? Again, as before, we've got a range of speakers, policymakers, academics, coming at this from different perspectives. I'm going to ask each of them to speak for 10 minutes. As I did earlier, we've got Mark Bousfield, who's part of the return of the Scouse diaspora. Boy goes away but comes back, has to be hugely successful here. Welcome back. Anthony Hollander is Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Research and Innovation. Lawson is Chief Executive of Health Partners, and inimitable elected mayor local Joe Anderson. I'm going to ask Joe to take the floor first and give us his thoughts about achievements and ambitions. The Mayor, the floor is yours.
Well, good morning, everybody. You might notice me as the guy who tells you all where to get your coffees from. That's called mayoral leadership. So I thought it's great that we're actually in this room with no windows in, because if you looked out, if this had windows, you'd be looking out, you'd be looking towards the sky, and you wouldn't be looking at the cranes, you'd be looking at the weather and blaming Liverpool City Council for it. So I'm glad we're within this room. But I was interested, and I was listening to the conversations that we had with our illustrious panel before, and I come here with no notes, and I still haven't got any notes, but I started just to write a number of things down, just about what was getting said, and the question that Michael has posed about how have we got here, where are we going. I think, it's remarkable when we look at the things that are happening in the country, if you like, where Liverpool has been at the forefront and pushed and innovated. And I'm not just talking about regeneration, but I'm talking about in the sense of devolution, pushing for devolution, arguing for devolution, fiscal devolution that enables us to do things. We were the first city in the country that signed up to a mayoral city deal, and we've used that to kickstart the renaissance that you see happening. In the last 9 years, 31,000 jobs, 4,500 new businesses, 12,000 new homes, 22 new schools, nothing closed in terms of leisure centres, children's centres, libraries, all protected as much as we possibly can. And I think, if we look at that as just something that is a hindrance and a millstone round our neck, £800 odd pound, £840 per family being lost in terms of local government cuts, 420 million. Just remember that figure, 420 million pound a year, per year. We would be better off if we hadn't had austerity from 2010, 420 million pound a year. So what have we done in since then? Well, just look around you. I every single day I talk to people who say to me, "Wow, the transformation of the city has been amazing. It's just changed." I addressed a conference in Liverpool last night at the Cunard building, where people were saying that to me, incidentally, from Glasgow as well. And for me, that is something that we're proud of. And I think, we haven't buried our head in the sand, we haven't chained ourselves to Downing Street demanding more money. We've actually got on with regenerating and growing our city. And it's interesting, the debate around further devolution. And, look, I've got 10 minutes, and I probably use about 5. That's the danger of giving a Scouse and a mic. But the problem is, I could talk to you about devolution for an hour. I could talk to you about regeneration in Liverpool for an hour. I could have a competition with Glasgow about what we're doing, what you're doing, what we've done, what we've achieved, and we've done more than you. But the fact of the matter is, we then start to talk about, inclusive growth, all of the things, again, that we've been doing here in the city. We've got these labels about inclusive growth, We've been doing it. We called it, you know, one of the criticisms that I make of the Labour Party in the past was how it embraced and encouraged best value. Best value in its purest sense as it was used was just about a financial model. It wasn't about social value. It wasn't about inclusive growth, and therefore it failed. So what we've done since 2010 is to make sure that the Liverpool pound is maximised. So when we invest and we use the local supply chains, we get apprenticeships, we get local people in work, and it's that inclusive growth, it's that social value, it's that fairness in society. That is that phrase, inclusive growth. It is that phrase in its entirety. But you know, when we start talking about the devolution issue, and it's interesting that some of our friends who advise government and some of our friends talk to people in government about what happens next. And it's this debate around the Northern Powerhouse, and it's this debate around further devolution. And I make no apologies for saying this, that in my view, politicians and the people in the southeast bubble still don't get it. You still don't get it. You still don't understand invest to earn and what it is that we ask for when we talk about devolution and fiscal devolution. And not just devolution and fiscal devolution, but real powers to make a difference when we're talking about sustainability and environmental issues. But when we talk about devolution, I know, because I work with them, I talk to them, I listen to them, I speak to them, that the Whitehall mandarins and the people who are the politicians in the south, and predominantly they're in the large majority, when we talk about UK PLC, they don't see it as that. They see it as the North whinging and crying for more money. So they see it as us asking for a bigger slice of the cake. But that's not the way I look at it. I look at it as growing the cake. I want Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, Nottingham, all of our great cities, including Glasgow, to provide more ingredients for the cake. That's the message to London. So we then get to this point about, you know, city deals. What do we do in the future? How do we look at what do we do? How do we seriously make inroads into inclusive growth? And by that I mean not just me standing here telling you how wonderful our city is because we're regenerating it, but how wonderful our city is because it's regenerating people, it's regenerating neighbourhoods, it's regenerating communities. That's inclusive growth. That's making sure that we get people connected to the opportunities. So, you know, what I want us all to do in this room, and I know many of us do it in this room, but I want to take it down to the level of our primary school head teachers and teachers, to our secondary school teachers and head teachers, to our businesses, to all of us, to actually encourage our young people and inspire our young people to aspire. So inspire them to aspire to the skills that we need for the future. So we want to talk to governments about releasing the shackles. So when you talk about, you know, fiscal devolution or all of the issues of devolution, talk to us about like skills, education, doing a Liverpool curriculum, vocational needs, bespoke to us. That's what city deals are about. They are bespoke deals that you can nurture and develop for where your strengths are. And every city is different. Every single one of us are all unique. Every single one of us have unique selling points. Every single one of us has different needs. That's what government should be doing, releasing the shackles and releasing us and giving us the ability to do things. It's like we've just started talking about building council houses again. Yes, we want to build council houses again because we want to give people secure tenancies. But alongside that, we're running foundations where we're giving people's aspirations to own their own home. We're setting up a mutual bank, going back to the way the old building societies used to operate, so that we can actually provide support to SMEs, but more importantly, enable people to get on the housing ladder by giving them no deposit mortgages again. That's inclusive growth. That means that we're dragging people along with us, rather than leaving them behind and then going having to pick them up 4 or 5 years later. I worked as a community development officer 30 years ago, And in the community that I worked in, Liverpool 1, I could tell you what was going on behind closed doors. And white people weren't going into work because we didn't have system change. We didn't have proper welfare to work. We didn't understand the needs of those families. And that's why we talk now about total place or place-based budgeting. It is absolutely essential that central government, and for the last 4 years, let's be absolutely clear, nothing has happened. Central government has done nothing for 4 years other than squabble about Brexit. There's been no innovation, nothing. The Northern Powerhouse with Jake Benny, as I keep saying, we might as well have Mary Benny, because, and that's not being disrespectful to him, okay, maybe it is, I've been talking about cakes.
It is actually, Joe.
It is, okay, but I've been talking about cakes, in fairness, Michael, in fairness, I have been talking about cakes.
Yes.
So there's a link.
Stop digging there, stop digging there.
The bottom line is, without having a strategy from central government and a policy that supports the Northern Powerhouse, then it means nothing. It remains just a strapline. And I come back to my point before, what I said about government recognising that it needs to get the best out of cities. And the best way it can do that is allow cities to actually deliver for the UK PLC. That's my goal as a politician, and I'll continue to argue for that, because it is about place-based. It is about us being able to deliver and do things in this city better than the Whitehall mandarins and people who've never seen the skies over Liverpool. So if we get more of that from central government, then our city will continue to grow, as will other cities, because we know what's best. We know where the weaknesses are, we know where the strengths are, and we can build on that. So that's my position in terms of where we need to go. It's more of the same, and if we do more of the same, then the city will not only keep its oomph and the buzz that is around our city, it will continue to deliver for everybody in the city, and we will become a city that is the best global city in the world. Our brand is unique. I believe passionately about that. I also believe passionately that the best days for the city lie ahead of us. So thank you.
Brilliant, Joe. A very passionate and very powerful explanation of what inclusive growth means in this city and well in the future. Thank you for that, Joe. We're now going to have the privilege and pleasure of listening to Dawn Lawson, who is Chief Executive of Liverpool Health Partners. Louise this morning said health is a challenge and an opportunity. She talked about fragmentation of governance, and she talked in the other session about what we're now doing to pull that together to deliver better health outcomes. So, Dawn Lawson, you can tell us what you're doing. Many thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not feeling any pressure at all around how we're going to harness all this and make it work. So I'm just going to set my timer, and then I don't talk too fast. So, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not a fellow Scouser, but I am a fellow Northerner. So I've arrived in Liverpool in October, and when the opportunity came about to work in Liverpool, I had a few chats with various people, and I heard the usual, but Liverpool's very difficult, but it's very complex, there are lots of organisations, but the NHS hasn't prioritised research, the universities talked about discovery science, and I heard a lot of these, think very carefully, Dawn messages. And then I came to Liverpool and I talked to some of the leaders, and what really struck me was that is the case. There's always some truth in some of those rumours, but actually there's a real appetite to do things differently. And it was another northern city to try and really make an opportunity. And so I've been here since October, and I'm really thrilled I made the move because I think it's a really exciting city. So I'll talk very quickly about the health partnership, and I'll talk about a few of the examples of how we're trying to join the dots across the system and really trying to change some of the narrative. So Louise referenced the academic health science system. So what we're trying to do is work across research, education and service to join those dots. Effectively, in a sentence, what we want to do is link really clever science with our population outcomes. So the NHS is leading the world in genomic medicine, for example, and we have some expertise, real expertise here in Liverpool. But some of our outcomes for some of our patients with colorectal cancer, for example, are really quite poor. And that's because they turn up for services very late stage 3 and 4 disease. So as my grandma would say, that makes the science neither use nor ornament in that case, because it didn't happen quickly enough. So that's really what we're trying to do. Think about how we get the really good science influencing population. So this is us. So the way we work is really important. You'll see collaborate up there, and I'll say a little bit more about that shortly. So we want to find out what works. This is not just discovery science, this is translational as well, but we actually want to improve things. So this has to be real. This can't be a glossy infrastructure. This has to really make a difference for our population, and then we come back to collaborate. You'll notice all our partners at the bottom, so 9 NHS organisations and 3 universities. That makes us the biggest academic health partnership in the country. Even the London ones don't have as many partners as we do. So the other thing that I've worked in transformation for 15 years, and the other thing I always hear about virtually any project or strategy that I've worked on is, but it's very complex. But we're very different. We're special, and we're different to this and different to that. And of course, you look at that list, and actually, you could be forgiven for thinking the system is really complex, and it is, but that's no excuse for not really dealing with some of the challenges that we've got. And some of those challenges are hard and they are complex. That doesn't mean we can't do anything about them. So we live in an age, don't we, where Obama said something along the lines of complexity. When the truth is complex, it's really inconvenient. And so there is something about how we think about and how we align the effort to really make the difference. So the idea is then that Liverpool matters for the right reason, and it matters because we've shifted the dial. I said I'd talk about collaboration, and that's really the key thing for me. And I shared the comments around the dinner last night. What was really interesting was the set of leaders with empathy for the people that we serve, but also with a willingness to do something different, take a risk. And that was really, really impressive. And this is why I think we've got some real opportunities in Liverpool. So I've heard people talk about dots. I've got some arrows here. So this is Deming again. And Deming is definitely on my list of dead people I wish to meet. And if I would have known about Deming's work before I did my MBA, I wouldn't have bothered. I would have just read Deming. And what he talks about is it's really simple. He talks about optimising a system. And he talks about a system being sub-optimised when all the little arrows in that bit are working really hard, doing their thing really well, but we haven't got an alignment as to what we achieve. So the cancer example is one. Why does this matter for patients? Well, we've just done some audit work, and a member of my team is a professor of neurology with an internationally renowned portfolio of work around epilepsy and new drugs for epilepsy. And he was really disappointed to find that of the nearly 3,000 people in the country that have epilepsy, 63% of those have not seen a specialist nurse or a clinician in the last year. Nice guidance says that's the best way to treat people. So there's something, and we're in a system where we've got academic expertise. We've got the Walton Neuro Centre, which is the only neuroscience centre outside London. And even with those assets, we are not managing to line things up so that we're dealing and treating our patients well. So this is why it really does matter. One of the things is, as part of Deming's work, is he talks about that constancy of purpose. And I think that's something that we've struggled to have before, but we certainly see alignment around the different aspects of the patch in Liverpool. There's also alignment around impact, though. Sorry, that slide's gone a little QA. One of the things we need to think about, and it's been picked up really in the conversations before, is impact for who and when. So an impact for an academic might be their publication in Nature. That's brilliant. But what does that matter for the people walking the streets of Liverpool? What does it matter an NHS organisation where we're worried about quality and CQC and financial sustainability? What does that mean for a patient? So there's something about we need to align our effort around a common view of the impact that we're trying to make. And it goes back to some of the social innovation stuff we've talked about earlier, which is who benefits. Because actually, if we're not careful, the really clever science can help the middle class worried well. So those 63% of epilepsy patients that haven't been seen in the last year, we need to do the analysis, but I bet 20 quid they're not the middle class patients that are turning up. So this, if we're not careful, we can really we can do things that we don't quite want to happen. And the impact is not mutually exclusive either. So there's something around aligning the strategy and then collaborating to achieve that. So that's a bit of the background. So one of the things we have done recently across Liverpool is develop the Liverpool Spark, which is a single point of access for research and knowledge. And what we have done is bring together, so each of our 9 organisations have their own research and development departments, and they organise and they manage the research function in those individual organisations. What we've done is brought those together into one organisation so that we have a streamlined approach to research. Now, I could forgive you for not being terribly excited that we've reorganised the research function across Liverpool, but this is the front door into our city and saying how we're going to work as a city and the importance of research. So we have heavy burden in our population, and they don't have the same opportunities as Louise was saying to participate in clinical trials. So we've brought this together so we've got one front door. We're having some really exciting conversations with our local authority colleagues, because if we can expand this to across health and social care, that is one way into an entire city for research for health and social care. Nobody else is doing that in the country. I'm getting calls from the south that are trying to bring together one university and one trust. Yeah, don't know what they do on Tuesday. We've got 9. And for me, this was a real test. So this was a test of me as a new leader in Liverpool, but actually it was a real test of my organisation members, because to make this work, they each had to give me about half of their R&D department staff to co-locate in one office to take this function. And they've done that, and it was a real step forward. So no other city will have one focal point. We'll have one contract, so we'll not have 9 contracts for each study, we'll have one contract for each study and one costing template. So I think for me this is an example of, you know, I heard the Liverpool's behind out, we need to catch up, we need, you know, I hear that, but actually I think there's something about Liverpool being brave enough to leapfrog and define our own fortunes. Nobody else is genuinely doing this. So I think this gives me the confidence that we can be really ambitious, honest and realistic, but actually really confident that we can do things differently. Thank you.
Oh, brilliant. Seriously, that's excellent. And I didn't realise that we are, you know, a national leader and all of that. So thank you, Dawn. Our next speaker, great pleasure, he's the chap who lives next door to me on my floor at the university, and a very good colleague indeed, Professor Anthony Hollander. He's Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Research and Impact at the University of Liverpool. Can you please welcome him?
Thank you very much, Michael. And I'm going to very slightly adjust my talk, given the very rich conversation we were having last night over dinner and also today, and I'll explain why in a moment. It seems to me that there are broadly 2 blocks to the innovation pathway when you look at how to use university brilliance from all of our academic staff and trying to commercialise and change the world through the commercial route. And the first is the pipeline of opportunity. So not just the volume of activity, but the engagement of academic staff who may or may not feel that commercialisation is something that's really relevant to them. So I'll say a few words about that. And then the second thing is the finding the money to take those opportunities forward. So the first one is, if you like, an internal university question, but of course it's very relevant to all of us in this room, because if we don't get that right, if we're not developing those innovation opportunities, then the volume of innovation opportunity isn't there. The second one is a national issue. It speaks to the north-south divide, and I'll come to it in a moment. So this slide really is to give the message that innovation within a university is not something that automatically happens if you make brilliant discoveries. So we're a world-leading university. I can tell you all the statistics. Janet will do an even better job of doing that, about how fantastic we are at brilliant publications, brilliant ideas across all 3 faculties. But innovation is how you take those ideas and turn them into something useful in the world out there, whether it's commercial innovation, social innovation, or whatever it is. And that will not happen passively. As a university, you need to organise to create an environment which supports that activity. So if you look at the timeline here, you'll see that our eye was off the ball in terms of commercialisation. So between 2010 and 2013, we generated just 3 spin-out companies. Sepsis, which is actually the only large-scale spin-out in terms of potential growth in 2010. CDDM is there in 2012, but actually that was a Unilever spin-out where we have a rather small percentage, so it shouldn't really be there. And Fusion Limited is an implant spin-out in the veterinary world, which doesn't have huge growth potential, but it's there. So optimistically, one might say one spin-out every couple of years, probably worse than that in reality. Lift Up in 2015 is not a research-based spin-out, it's an education-based spin-out, very brilliant idea from the dental school. I'll say more about that on the next slide. But in terms of research-led IP and commercialization, we didn't do a good job at all. We've been reorganizing ourselves to focus on this problem, and in the past year, we spun out 3 companies: Porous Liquid, joint with Queen's University Belfast; Tandem Nano, which is a huge multi-billion-dollar opportunity potentially in the future in terms of nanomedicines; and Nidor, which is another health-related company. So 3 in 1 year, and you'll see there's 3 aspirational spin-outs over the next year. We think we're going to spin out another 3, and we're aiming for at least 3 every year moving forward. So we've moved from 1 every 2 years, optimistically, to a baseline of 3 a year moving forward. That's through relatively simple internal changes. I hope we can do more. The pipeline is one of the problems, as I'll come back to in a moment. This is Lift Up, although it's not IP-based in a sense. This is about an iPad-based approach to training dental students that can be extended to many other areas. But as a company, it was incubated in a way that shows a very good journey through the university. So internal incubation is how we supported the company internally, put some money into it. And then in 2015, we span it out, got a management team in there, grew the business. And then this year, so just after 3 years, there was a trade sale which brought money into the university, money to the shareholders, and is really taking that opportunity forward and maintaining the effectiveness of that educational activity. Most technology-based companies will not develop that quickly. It'll take far more than 3 years to get them through that pathway. That's the kind of pathway you're looking at. This celebrates some of the positive stuff we're doing in the university to drive that pipeline of activity. I don't have time to go through it, but if you look in the bottom left in terms of patent filings, what it shows you is that we have a portfolio of about 180 patents. In the past year, we had 115 discoveries, new disclosures, of which 15 were filed as patents. Those will gradually drop away over time. I'm sure you all know the statistics, and a small number of them will lead to spin-outs or license deals, and of the spin-outs, not all of them, in fact, rather few will be maintained over 10 years or more. So there's a kind of war of attrition to make this work. So to be effective, we need to get that pipeline up, and one of the learning points for me over the past 24 hours through all of our discussion is that inclusive growth, if we can show how developing IP here in this university can make a difference locally to this city, I think we can be more effective at drawing some of our academics in to this kind of activity, which they wouldn't otherwise naturally feel engaged in. So I pose that as a question for colleagues that I hope will take forward in discussion. How can we demonstrate a mechanism for inclusive growth through this kind of activity? Because I think that can drive up the pipeline. Okay, so that's just a bit about this university and some of the challenges we face. We need to create a really exciting, vibrant environment for developing any IP, whether it's technical, scientific, or other. And we have some growing assets within the Knowledge Quarter and outside it. We've got the Science Park, Avenue HQ, Santander Incubator, and other incubator space. We have economic assets where we're experimenting with innovation So the Materials Innovation Factory, Sensor City and Cedar I'll come to on the next slide. And we have innovation clusters, networks, some of which are listed there. These are really important for trying to join up the dots for the alignment that Dawn was talking about a minute ago, and we need to really play to those strengths. These three flagship projects, they really are experimenting in innovation. We don't know yet if they're going to work. The Material Innovation Factory, our joint venture with Unilever, we hope will deliver a large volume of IP and spin-outs in the future, but it's too early in its history to know if that's going to work. CEDAR is a virtual collaboration between this university and Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, which has ambitions to support commercialization of therapeutics in the infection space, including AMR, as you heard earlier. And Sensor City is a university enterprise zone with a focus on electronic sensors. And all of those have ambitions and mission statements to drive up innovation and spin out companies. We have the Digital Innovation Factory that Eva van der Hoek is leading on, now currently being built and will open in a year's time, and that will be a fourth experimentation with innovation. And actually, I think that's really important. There is no one way to innovate, and we need to invent new ways to innovate and be more effective. And we are doing that here as an experimental process, and we should celebrate that and keep on finding new ways to change the game in innovation. But there is a problem, a geographic problem, a place-based problem. You can see it here. This is the number of deals, the number of spin-outs backed by venture capital companies. I think it was in, it says at the bottom from 2011 to 2017. So the grey bar, just below the black bar at the top, is the Northwest. The blue bar is London alone. So you can see that London now gains approximately 50% of the innovation deals. The Northwest has a tiny percentage, and the North in general has a poor percentage. That's a real problem. It reflects both very good things about the innovation activity in the South, but also it reflects aspects of the North-South divide. North-South divide means different things to different people. Okay, I'll admit it, I'm a Londoner, I grew up in London, and when I was growing up in London, the North was somewhere up there that was culturally different. I had no concept of financial disparities. But I'm very well aware now that there are financial disparities, and in the innovation space, what I know, and we see it in reality every day, is that most of the venture capital money is sitting in the South, and there's so much opportunity there that those venture capital companies and individuals don't feel the need to get out of their armchairs and come up to the North and pick up the opportunities which we have here, because they've got a plethora of opportunities in the South. It's not whinging, it's reality. If we advertise open events for venture capitalists to come and see IP opportunities in this region, we will get some of them saying we don't need to. Literally that. Not you haven't got the IP, but rather we don't need to. I think we can change that game, but we can only do that by working collectively across the North, and that's my main message today. Liverpool on its own is not going to solve this problem. We need to network across the North in different ways. We're doing it in this way. This is a project called Prosper, where we're networking around postdoctoral researcher career development and interfacing of postdocs with employers outside universities, trying to close the skills gap in the industrial strategy and so on. It's a project that's funded by Research England, a £4 million project, which is joint with Universities Manchester and Lancaster, led from here, and which we hope to spread out across the northern 8, the N8 universities in due course. North by Northwest iCure is an innovation cluster which includes Liverpool, Queen's, Belfast, and other universities that are listed there. And it's a way of trying to train early career researchers to be entrepreneurial, and this is particularly in the health space. So we're working as a cluster in that way as well. But where we're not working well at the moment as a cluster is in the kind of hard brass tacks of presenting the North as an innovation opportunity collectively. You can just about see the Golden Triangle there on the map of Oxford, Cambridge and London, who do this brilliantly, as Henrietta will know and Emma will know. And the Golden Triangle is a fantastic worldwide brand for UK PLC. All of us benefit, this university benefits, because the brand of UK universities and the innovation environment around them positively affects all of us. And the statistics are fantastic. The Golden Triangle universities generate about 5,000 new PhD graduates a year. They attract in roughly 30% of research council grant funding from government. And for every pound of that funding, they attract 82% leveraged funding. That is innovation money on which to build from the discoveries they make based on the research council funding. That cluster is brilliant, but if the government is going to meet its 2.4% target, so the target of 2.4% of GDP going into R&D, the expansion needs to be not just in the Golden Triangle, which is already very constrained by transport limits, by growth limits, and so on. There are other clusters, and the N8, the Northern 8 Universities cluster, is a pre-existing cluster. We're there as a research cluster, but we need to sell ourselves as an innovation cluster as well. That's my view. So we don't match the Golden Triangle in terms of statistics, but we're not that far off. About 4,000 PhD graduates a year, not bad. 18% of our CUK funding, I'd like to see that go up, but that's still not bad, about 2/3 of the Golden Triangle. But leveraged funding, 48 pence per pound. We're not getting the innovation funding in to capitalise on the research funding that we get in. We can close that gap, but we can only do it if we present ourselves as a cluster of opportunity. I've drawn the circles there to show very approximately the geographic space difference between the N8 and the Golden Triangle. And you might say, how can you be a cluster on such a big geography, especially with the very slow trains which we have, because no one will update the technology up here in terms of transport infrastructure. But nevertheless, I would argue that in the digital world, that kind of geography really shouldn't matter as much as it did 50 years ago, and we should play that card very strongly moving forward. So, Liverpool City Region has an evolving ecosystem, a very exciting one. As a university, we're trying to lead activities in collaboration with other universities across the N8, the Northern Powerhouse, and so on. We have many local assets, we need to build more, but I really feel passionately that if we can sell the Northern card strongly for the real strength we are in innovation and not just in university research clusters, that we can then bring in the investors to base themselves up here, and that will help Liverpool to grow as well as other areas in the north. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. That was absolutely brilliant analysis of what we do well in university, what we do well in the city region, but also some very powerful, realistic messages about the need to do better and a way of handling it. So thank you for that. As you'll notice, we tried to bring a variety of partners to this conversation. We've had the City Council, we've had the university. Very important we have a Liverpool City Region, and so I'm delighted that our next speaker is from Liverpool City Region. Mark Bousfield is the return scarcity Aspera, Oxford educated, Johns Hopkins educated, Google, European Reconstruction Bank, Igloo, tremendous skills, tremendous experience, and he is the man who's going to say what we're going to do with the money. So can you please welcome the Director of Commercial Development Investment, Liverpool City Region, Mark Bousfield.
Thank you very much, thank you. I'm not going to say what we're doing with the money. I'm going to talk about other things as well, if that's okay. So, yeah, I'm here because I have the privilege of administering the devolved money that we received from Joe Manning and colleagues under our devolution deal. I will say from the outset, because it's an important point, that nothing we receive under the devolution deal is anywhere near what we no longer have in our regular budget. It's a point I think it's important to make. How are we performing? The obvious answer to that is it depends who you ask. And never in my professional lifetime has it been so possible to be doing economically well and socially much less well than now. And I think that in itself probably warrants another conference. But from the city region's point of view, we grew at 5% GVA growth last year, better than any other city, with the second most productive labour market for productivity per hour worked in the north. And at the same time, we have Louise's health figures. And so to give a couple of examples before we start talking about what we're doing, it is perfectly possible for me as, say, a postgrad in materials science to bowl out of bed in a really nicely refurbished terrace house somewhere around Granby, roll into work, and contribute to the most patent-intensive, patent-productive set of work to building and cluster in the UK in personal healthcare. Likewise, and this one is exciting for me, it's perfectly possible for me as an apprentice living in Halton to go and work at Sandon Global, which is a printing and engraving high-value manufacturing business that exports to 70 countries and that the CA is hoping to support with an expansion loan this week, and have a well-remunerated, stable career in one of the UK's most prominent advanced manufacturing clusters. But this person's neighbour could equally be suffering from some of the mental and physical health problems that we've talked about, and therefore have no chance at all at working anywhere near one of the UK's 2 supercomputers, which is in our city region at Daresbury, site at Daresbury. So what are we doing? Some easy things and some difficult things. The easy thing that we're doing, the low-hanging fruit in this, is that we're updating our pitch. Colin, you talked about it earlier, but there's some simple things. So the way we're talking about ourselves as a city region, ourselves as an economy, has room to change and room to improve. Who knows that we have the best computer science department in the country by research? Probably not, right? Who knows that we have the best sports science program in the country? Again, not many people. Who knows that of museums and cultural attractions outside of London, last year we had, in most visited terms, number 1, number 2, and number 4. Bonus points if you know which they are. It starts with the World Museum.
World Museum number 1.
Yeah, World Museum. Slavery and Maritime. And then I think it's Museum of Liverpool. Is that right? Yeah. Who knows that we already spend more than 4% of our economic output on R&D? So the national average is 1.7. The national target is 2.4, and we're at 4.2 or 4.4, I can't remember which. But we don't talk about these things about ourselves, and we have to start talking about these things, because these are the things that we're globally good at, and that we're going to make a global future from. That's a short-term opportunity, and it's really interesting to hear about the one front door for education, for research, medical research, because we've done a similar thing for inward investment, so one front door for inward investment that essentially means wherever you arrive in the city region, you can have good account management, an understanding of how the place works, and accurate data to talk about your business proposition and how it might land in the city region. Again, it's something that we can do without major changes that will simply improve the way that we're seen to be doing business. But let's think a little bit more about the longer term prospects here. And again, I come back to Joe Manning and what he said about the national industrial strategy and the opportunity, place-based opportunity that we've been given by government to generate this local industrial strategy, because the local industrial strategy, looking really carefully at what the economics is really saying about what we're genuinely good at, allows us to focus on a couple of things. So first thing, this is a city region that's dominated by SMEs. And when you look at the numbers, it becomes logical then to do what we're doing, which is to provide the biggest set of support in living memory to business growth, business finance, mentoring and networks. And recognize, I think it was Emma, working with what you've got, recognizing that what we've got could give us a lot more. We talk about this often, don't we? Second bit, so we've had business support. Second bit will be strategic projects. So the local industrial strategy is going to say, is going to tell us that we have global strengths in advanced manufacturing. It's going to tell us that we have global strengths in certain type of pharma production. It's going to tell us that we have emerging strengths in areas of life sciences, cognitive and high-performance computing. And it's important to us to link those known and emerging strengths with strategic projects. I'm not going to say anything about that, but I think that will come in the next in the next session. I think we'll hear about a couple of projects. But just to know that we're aligning the economic data with the opportunity of the local industrial strategy to projects that will make a transformative difference. And of course, I'm linking back to inclusion, working on our weaknesses. So there are probably 90,000 people in the city region who would like to be in a labour market but aren't. And they're not in that labour market for reasons of mental and physical health, caring, the things that we already know about. So the local industrial strategy equally provides this example, like you said in your comments, for us to pay particular attention to those people and what we can do for them. I'm not going to say another word on that because I'm fully confident that Tony will be compelling on the subject. If that's what you're going to talk about. And on that note, just finally, that I think the prosperity index is really compelling from that, and I would like to talk about it. Thank you. So just to draw some lessons, I've got none of my own, but I am going to draw on Michael's latest book, Liverpool Beyond the Brink, an excellent read.
Plug there, Michael.
I must say that he was a lot nicer about than you were.
So this is one of the things that comes out of the final chapter of Michael's book, right? We've done really well at physical. We've done really, really world-beatingly well at the physical. The city looks vastly different to how it did 10, 20, 30 years ago. The next stage of our growth, as you prescribe and as others have prescribed for us, is to focus back again, and it comes back to, I think, your comment about what regeneration means, is to focus on the people and the businesses. So if there's something for next year, what I'd like to see is that we've engaged enough businesses for all of the empty seats to be full of businesses who see that it's in their interest to come and participate here. The other thing that comes through in your conclusions, I think that is important, is this idea of the long term. The opportunity of devolution is to think for the long term and to plan for the long term, be it Northern Powerhouse Rail, be it the cultural leadership that's led to that, the 1, 2 and 4 in the national rankings. And that's starting to come together in our place. And then the third thing is for me much more slippery, but is around leadership and coherence. So on a really good day or a really good year, the combined authority might put, let's say we do £500 million of investment in the next 4 years. That will still be well under 1% of what the public sector spends in the city region. And so it'll be at the margins. But what we've heard today is a set of leaders from civic, society, local government, health partners, combined authority, business coming together And once you start getting to that scale and that sort of coherent leadership, then you're talking about much bigger numbers, and your ability to bend the spend towards what you want, I would say, is radically different. And I think that's one of the great and exciting promises, actually, for the next couple of years. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. That was absolutely brilliant. And I wasn't going to mention the book, but since he has, they're giving it away in Paris. Marvellous. I mean, very powerful stuff. I know the Mayor has a ministerial conversation to be had at some point, and we'll have to slip away, not an editorial comment. But we have 10 minutes, I think, for comments and questions. A huge range of very challenging, important issues. My head is frankly spinning with it all, but I'm sure there are colleagues in the room who have made some notes and want to raise some things. So we have our microphones running around. Please, it's Helen Heap. Sorry, Helen, I didn't see your hand, please. I'll try and take one or two together. Helen Heap from Seabourn Mill.
Hi, Helen Heap. I'm a social investor and fellow of the Heseltine Institute, do a lot of research on social economy in the region. I'd like to pick up on one of the comments that Mayor Anderson made, which is about invest to earn. And my question is, how much of the £2 billion that has been invested and will be invested in Knowledge Quarter Liverpool is on inclusive growth initiatives? And does the money that is being invested in those things come from a revenue budget or a capital budget? Would we be able to do a lot more if we were able to do invest to earn type initiatives through spending capital money, investing into inclusive growth type initiatives?
Okay, I think it's a very powerful question, and I know the Mayor would like to respond to it, and Colin may chip in later, but Mayor Anderson.
Yeah, I think absolutely. The Knowledge Quarter is a risk that the council took. You know, when I made my point before about what I could talk about all day in different chunks, was if you look at the Knowledge Quarter and you look at Paddington Village in particular, that's because the council took a risk investing, but the whole site, the 30 acres, belongs to us. And it is about inclusive growth. It is about making sure that we push out the city centre, but we connect through to Kensington, and we make sure that we have got opportunities for people in that surrounding area that can link into the development, have the skills and the opportunities that takes place there, that growth. But the capital investment versus the revenue is a challenge that faces us, you know, with borrowing limits, because everything we borrow has to be paid back, and we need a revenue income in order to pay for the capital borrowing. But you know, we're borrowing, for instance, £250 million to invest in housing, and we see that as a invest to earn. The city is now receiving, through our invest to earn programme, £28 million more a year than we did in 2011 as a result of our invest to earn. Unfortunately for us, I have to use that money to prop up adult social care, children's social care, keep our children's centres open. This is the whole point about the disconnect between investment and opportunities, and the point about Mark, and the only thing I would disagree with Mark, he says when governments are giving us money, it's not them giving us money, it's our money. And it's about them doing invest to earn as well, enabling cities to be able to do more. But you're absolutely right, that's the challenge for me. That is the challenge about regeneration and regenerating communities and people. Everything that we invest in has, in my view, a social return. Even that money that we invest in brings a return, and then we invest that in communities and people to protect them.
Thank you, Joe. Other hands, please. Sorry, Roger Platt and a colleague here. Thanks.
Could I ask the panel to reflect on scale and whether you need different scale for different activities? So a lot this morning said that if we're inclusive growth, we have to drive smaller scale than cities down to regions and neighbourhoods. Yet Anthony reminded us that big science needs a scale bigger than a city, perhaps the whole of the north. So have we got, do we need a portfolio of scales to drive what we want to do?
Thank you for that. And I will take this colleague's comment or question so that we can reflect upon both. And it's probably the last we can take, but please.
Yeah, it's just one about economics really. So we talked about trickle-down economics and sort of that neoclassical economics approach. What are the pros, cons, alternatives, and what's the sort of LEPS approach? And with more to you, Mark, about the direct investment. Are you following that approach, or are you doing an alternative, or what does that look like?
Okay, Mark, do you want to answer that trickle-down thing first, before we go to the more general question about scales and levels and what's the right place? Mark?
It's difficult for me, this one, because I don't think we recognise trickle-down growth as a formula or a methodology, either for investment or for growth. So it's more commentary. We seek to, so we focus our support on projects with transformational potential in the economy, but you never do anything that will leave people behind. That doesn't have a name, so you can call it inclusive growth, but for me that doesn't have a name. That's just public investment into economic growth. Sorry, Bebek.
Okay, on scale, let me start by saying I made a career out of urban policy. When you look at the neighbourhoods, to say, why didn't you look at the city centre? When you look at the local authority, to say, why didn't you look at the city region? When you look at the city region, say, why didn't you look at the northern powerhouse? All these scales matter, and it all depends on the problem at hand. Social intervention, not exclusively, certainly is an economic, it's a neighbourhood approach. If you're talking about economies, at least the city, region and beyond. That's my take. We go back and forth, throwing out the baby with the bathwater as we go. But anyway, that's not, well, I'm not here to say it. Anthony, you raised that point, actually. About,
thanks. Thanks for the question, Roger. And it does sound like a contradiction, but I don't think it is. So the point I was trying to make is that in order to be visible nationally or even internationally to investors, to those with the money to back what we've got, we need to coordinate and act as a cluster. That's the big scale stuff. It also will work in terms of competing for large research grants and so on, by the by, but I'm particularly talking about innovation. But actually what has really struck me is that when you talk about the inclusive part of inclusive growth, that's kind of small scale. That's what's happening here. So you've got to do both. And the homework question is how we join that up.
Thank you. You're nodding, Dawn, you agree. Yeah. Is there another voice in the House, as we say? I'm not looking for it unless it's desperate, because we're over time. Brilliant, I'm going to say I'm ahead. That was marvellous. As we said at the start, we're scratching the surface. We've had lots and lots of presentations, many issues raised we can't dig into. I hope in our final session, when colleagues reflect on what they've heard and all that, be a chance to do that and more questions. But for the time being, can I ask you to think, again, their answer to go to meet the Minister, but our remaining colleagues, can you please show your appreciation?